Thank you. I'm Sharon Citino, and I work with Houston Water. I'm the planning director for Houston Water, and I've been there for about a year now. It's official. And I'm here with Maureen Crocker, who's my counterpart over in Stormwater Operations. We're both under the umbrella of Houston Public Works, but we're within different service lines. So we're separated in terms of our management chain, and we have different initiatives that we're focused on, but we're doing a lot of similar, looking at similar concerns and similar planning issues. And so we've really tried to collaborate and work together. And this was a nice opportunity for us to do that today. So Houston Water, just a little bit about us. We are a large regional water utility. And when I say water, it's water and wastewater. We consider it one water. We have quite a bit of surface water. Our percentage of surface water to groundwater is about, I want to say 86% to 14%. So we're predominantly a surface water utility. We've been very fortunate to benefit from the planning of future leaders at Houston Water who have been very smart in their surface water acquisitions. Not only do we have a healthy groundwater supply, but the surface water supply is in 2 river basins that we've developed, 3 different reservoirs, which makes us more resilient and adaptable to water shortages. If there are quality issues, if there are droughts, we can pull from different river basins. We also have water rights in a 3rd river basin, in the Brazos River Basin, that are in dispute at the current moment. The state legislature kind of took those away from us this last season, or session, but we're working on that. That will be our 4th reservoir that would be built on the farther west side of town and give us an even more diverse water rights portfolio. We have currently 3 surface water plants, one of which is expanding from an 80 MGD plant to a 400 MGD plant. It's, I think, the largest project of its kind in the world today. And of course, we have a lot of other infrastructure to support the drinking water operations. On the wastewater side, we have a lot of facilities. We have 39 wastewater treatment plants. When I first moved here from little Fort Collins, Colorado, and I was working for Loveland, Colorado, that had a population of about 75,000 people, that number, 39, it made my head explode because I think we had 1. So managing 39 wastewater treatment plants is quite a bit of expense and effort. 384 lift stations and over 6,000 miles of wastewater lines.
Thank you. All right, just a quick introduction to the group I lead or work. I'm part of the Transportation and Drainage Operations service line. Within that, we own and operate the city's right-of-way, basically the transportation infrastructure as well as the drainage infrastructure. So there's 16,000 lane miles in the city of Houston, which is equal to 5,700 center line miles. That is more lane miles than the TxDOT Houston District office maintains and operates. There's almost 2,500 signalized intersections and over 1,300 bridges. On the drainage side, we've got 3,900 storm drains, and this is all over 650 square miles, so it reaches far and wide. 6,600 outfalls, 2,500 miles of roadside ditches, so parts of the city are served by storm sewers, parts are served by roadside ditches. And then the city currently operates 33 detention basins. So within Houston is part of Harris County. And within Harris County, there are 22 watersheds that are really the responsibility of the Harris County Flood Control District. And so from the local perspective, the city of Houston is responsible for moving water from neighborhoods into the Harris County system that eventually goes out into the bayous and to the Gulf of Mexico. Within Harris County, 30% of the county is mapped in a mapped watershed. So there's a huge part of Harris County that is not currently mapped, which means only part of the risk is shown. And 62% of the existing structural development in Harris County was built before there were any floodplain regulations put in place. So many places which are in the floodplain didn't really know it until the regulations went into place. So we have a challenge. It's one thing to say we're going to update the regulations and limit development in a certain area, but there is a huge part of the region that was developed before there was any mapping of the floodplain. Yes.
Sorry, I just want to clarify, because that's an important concept. You're saying 30% are in the map floodplain, but they're not all mapped, or?
Not all of the floodplain is mapped in Harris County. So Harris County right now has a huge effort underway post-Harvey. It's called Map Next. It is being coordinated very closely with FEMA. They are doing some really cutting-edge modeling work of the channel system. And also they are, for the first time, going to take into consideration urban flooding and sheet flow. And so the maps, they're going to develop risk maps, which show not just the floodplain, but show ponding and the potential for sheet flow impacts. And this will be publicly available information that will allow property owners in Houston or buyers in the Houston area to really look and see where the potential risk is, or what the risk level is of a location where they're thinking of buying property. That is underway. That's going to take 5 to 7 years to complete by the time FEMA reviews the data and then authorizes any changes to the maps. So the impetus for this was Hurricane Harvey in August of 2017. This event was widely covered on television. I'm sure a lot of you saw it. The maximum rainfall for this event was 60.58 inches. It is the highest rainfall on record.
That's our annual rainfall. We get
In a couple days.
60 inches a year, and we got it in a weekend.
So in just one day, there were more than 8,500 calls to 311, which is more than 3,000, higher than the average. Some homes, particularly on the west side of town in the energy corridor area, they were underwater for 2 weeks. That's the area where the Corps of Engineers had to do releases from the dam, controlled releases. 29,000 families had structural damage to their houses, and there were over 37,000 people in 270 Red Cross shelters during this event. This prompted a lot of action. There's since been huge support for a bond referendum, so Harris County Flood Control has a significant bond program underway now. The City of Houston is coordinating very closely with them. We are coordinating our investments to kind of maximize the benefit associated with any investments. This was really the starting point for all of that. But I will tell you, when I started my position 2 years ago, when we looked at data, Harvey was considered an outlier. So we had that data, but when we looked at prioritizing projects, we just considered it an outlier, and we're not planning on the basis of that. But back to earlier, there was a little bit of discussion about the tropical storms. And so the 6 heaviest tropical cyclones or rainfalls in the United States have been in southeast Texas. And just since 2015, Houston has experienced 2 100-year and 1 500-year storm. And the most recent of those was Tropical Storm Imelda in September. And actually, Sharon and I were here for the One Water event. And during all the breaks, everybody was out in the lobby watching the coverage of Houston again, doing high water rescues. And that's when I realized we needed to, these are not outliers. We need to adapt, and we need to start planning for these extremes. Just shortly after Harvey, the new rainfall data came out, Atlas 14, and it shows that at least for the 100-year storm in the Houston area, it's 3 or 4 inches higher than it has been. So when we plan now, we are looking at the effective 500-year floodplain and using the Atlas 14 rainfall totals as we design projects right now until the new maps are completed and until we really revisit our policy about what our level of service should be for drainage and how we're going to address all the challenges and that really develop a diverse portfolio to deal with it.
So just real quickly, this is post-Harvey, trying to just get a sense of what happened to our utilities. The drinking water operations fared pretty well. We were able to operate all of our water treatment plants, but we came really close to losing one of them, but we were able to keep it afloat. So we didn't have to issue any boil water notices, which is, I think, pretty incredible that our team was prepared. We have a lot of emergency and disaster training. Those folks were well stocked. They slept there for a week. We have high water vehicles. We had help from other agencies who lent drones to help us map how to get in and out of the plants with extra things that we might need. So that was a real success story. Post-Harvey, though, we've seen a lot of impact on our transmission and distribution system. So the weight of all of that water affected the ground. It caused the ground to settle farther. It impacted the pipes deep below, and so we're now living with those impacts and having to address them. The wastewater operations, unfortunately, did not fare so well. Of those 39 plants that we have, 4 were completely inundated, which is, as you can imagine, a mess. And we had 100 lift stations that were damaged. All 39 plants were operational within 3 weeks, but that repair work is ongoing and will be ongoing for some time. So that's been a very expensive operation, but it's helped to accelerate some of our planning that we were already putting in place. So this is just a graphic to illustrate why our wastewater utility is so vulnerable to flooding. Of course, those wastewater plants need to be sited near the bayou for discharge of the effluent, and we've got 39 of them. So that's a lot of infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier, to keep track of, to repair, to maintain, to operate, and so that's been one of the challenges for us, is now looking at where those sites are more vulnerable and what we're going to do about it. So what does that mean for Houston Water? What are we looking to do to make ourselves more resilient now that we know that these floods are not an anomaly, they're not outliers? We can't probably plan for a Harvey. That is a pretty crazy storm. But we do have these routine rain events now. I'll call them routine. I don't know if I should, but they certainly feel like it. So we need to do something. So there were some things that we are doing, and plan to do. With regard to operations, this is kind of the immediate things that we did. Everybody who's in water resources, close your ears, because this is very painful. They asked us, it was a political response. The citizens were upset. There were a lot of folks who flooded. They were looking for solutions. They were looking for buckets to hold water. And Houston has water reservoirs, water storage reservoirs. They're not flood mitigation reservoirs, but people don't understand the difference. They don't understand that they're designed for different capabilities, and the politicians, whether they understood it or not, there was a lot of pressure to repurpose our water storage reservoirs to help with flood mitigation. So that's what we're doing. So right now we're under a temporary, and we say temporary, it's probably 3 or so years, until we can get some of the dredging done on the river that contributes to the reservoirs here that I'm about to talk to, the San Jacinto River. We are operating our 2 reservoirs along the San Jacinto River, Lake Conroe, which is north, and Lake Houston, which is south. We're operating those in conjunction with one another to do releases, coordinated releases, to allow additional room for stormwater. So the northern reservoir does a seasonal release, where we release a certain amount of water in the spring and in the fall, and then let them come back up. That water is lost. It's water that would otherwise supply us during drought that is no longer available to the city of Houston. Water in Lake Houston is lowered prior to a predicted storm. If the National Weather Service says that it's going to produce 3 inches or more of rain within 48 hours, we start lowering that reservoir, and we lower it down to, I want to say like 41.5 feet, which is about a foot below its normal pool elevation. Water treatment, I think somebody mentioned earlier from Austin that the water quality changes with flooding events, so we've had to change how we treat our water. We've had to be adaptive in our chemical processes. I can't begin to explain that, but if you have questions, I can put you in touch with the right people. So we are doing that ongoing. Regarding planning, these are the kinds of things that we're thinking about in the future, that we're currently working toward. Of course, elevating our infrastructure, anything electrical that could be compromised or is in danger of being inundated, we want to get it up. Resiting groundwater wells so that they're not in vulnerable locations so we can still pull the water out as needed. Regionalizing lift stations, that's a big one. That's what we were going to do anyway. I really appreciated Joel's comments earlier talking about things that you would do anyway and getting multiple benefits. That's one of them. We're looking at trying to get rid of a lot of extra stuff and consolidate it. And if we can do that, we have less vulnerable infrastructure. Same with consolidating our wastewater treatment plants. Same goals, making bigger wastewater treatment plants in strategic locations, removing the ones that are more subject to flooding. Interestingly, another thing we're hoping to do is to take some of the consolidated wastewater treatment plants, or at least one in particular, and build a new, perhaps, water treatment plant nearby that could take advantage of either the Brazos River water that we hope to maintain, or the effluent, and treat it and put it back into the system that would come out of that consolidated wastewater treatment plant. Or maybe we'll site it near the Corps' two flood mitigation reservoirs that had to release water under emergency purposes. Maybe we could help out with that. Rather than flood communities, channel that water into some sort of a system that could then shut off other sources of water and use the flood water. Strategic storage in deep tunnels, that's really about infiltration and inflow. Houston with all the water. There's really, and also the shifting soils. We are subject to I&I. And so one of the things that we're looking at doing is building storage facilities. They won't be attractive, probably. Developers won't love them, but they will keep us from having sanitary sewer overflows when we have those big rainstorms that force a lot of extra water into our system that needs to be handled on a kind of quick basis. We can't necessarily financially build all new stormwater system, or I'm sorry, wastewater system to collect that extra water that's coming in, but we can put it into temporary storage and then slowly pulse it out once the rain event has passed. Deep tunnels, again, just trying to move it out of the neighborhoods and channel it deep down below so that we're not creating any sort of issues on an environmental level. And then finally, an integrated water master plan. I'm kind of a little embarrassed to admit that we don't have already, as a city the size of Houston, an integrated water master plan. So we're behind our peers here in Texas. We do have pieces and parts, but we're very eager to get something that is looking at it collectively, water, wastewater, and potentially stormwater. We see it as a sister utility where there are opportunities, just like I mentioned with the core facilities. If there are ways that we can work together and have multiple benefits out of similar projects and contribute funding, then all the better. So that's what we're hoping to do here soon. And then technology, these are the things that we're actually doing that will help inform our future planning. A lot of data, crunching, collecting, predictive analytics, collaboration with research institutions and other utilities. We have just recently engaged in an exercise with a technology hub. So I think that's all I've got for that one. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. All right, so much like Houston Water and the stormwater side, we are trying to adapt and figure out how to become more resilient. We've taken some small steps at the outset. We've created a stormwater action team, and this is a small group within our department that works actually with council member offices to identify areas based on community input where there are small needs, when I say small, I mean non-capital improvement type projects that cost $10 to $20 million that can be designed and constructed pretty quickly to provide some very localized relief throughout the community. Those types of projects are going to address the more standard rainfall, not the extreme events. We're also really starting to look at green stormwater infrastructure. We do have detention basins, and Harris County Flood Control District has several of them, but we are trying to look at getting more beneficial uses out of those properties and not just using them as big holes in the ground to hold water. And also, we are currently working with the Houston Parks Department to develop a toolkit and look at the parks based on their size and uses, and then look at the types of improvements, whether they be engineering or green stormwater infrastructure that could be added to the parks as they are redeveloped to improve their ability to at least slow down or retain water, in addition to providing the other benefits that they provide. On the private side, we are developing some incentives for green development. There's a booklet that's available of some of the options we're looking at, and we're in the process of kind of fitting them into the city ordinances and making them actual incentives that are available to developers. Also underway is a climate impact assessment for the city. This is being run out of the mayor's office. It should be completed in the next couple of months, and it is taking a very close look at some indicators. They've identified some indicators which range from drought and temperature, high temperature, to extreme rainfall and duration of rainfall, that can be used in future planning by all departments throughout the city. So that's underway. We also have a sustainability effort underway to help develop some new methodologies or new options as departments plan some of their infrastructure projects. So we're working closely in this interdepartmental effort to kind of break down some barriers and approach things a little bit differently.
So related, really this, trying to kind of take a broader lens at what we're working on. I need to look at my cheat sheet here. I was making notes fast and furiously, but along with the strategic plan that we're talking about, we're also looking at opportunities to leverage existing partnerships, existing plans. The City of Houston has a lot of plans, including a climate action plan, which is in development. Trying to work with some of those and seeing where we can find some adaptive approaches. I mentioned earlier looking at the opportunity for siting a new water treatment plant that would help maybe with some of the flooding impacts, and also take advantage of our consolidated wastewater treatment plants. Looking at opportunities for vacated sites as we start to move some of those wastewater treatment plants and consolidate them. We're going to be abandoning sites that we've been using, and is there an opportunity for stormwater to be using those for detention? We've been taking on the exercise, not just within Houston Water and Stormwater Operations, but also within parks. I'm not sure.
And the housing department is doing a lot of buyouts, particularly of multifamily properties that have repetitive losses. So as they buy those out, they're frequently in the floodplain, so housing can't rebuild multifamily there, so they're being transferred to public works, and we can use them for some type of local detention.
So we're looking at overlaying those maps and just seeing where opportunities exist so that we can partner, and we're putting non-productive property into productive use for those purposes. Identifying projects with multiple benefits. Recently, the Parks Department did and you know more about this, did a renovation of the Memorial Golf Course, correct? And so one of their goals was to reduce their potable water needs. I mean, that's a big expense for them. And so they had a detention facility that they were planning on, and I think that in talking with Stormwater and some opportunities, they decided to make that a whole lot bigger. And so now it serves as a greater detention basin for stormwater. It shifts them off of potable use when it's available, and so it serves the needs of all three departments, and it's been a win-win-win. If we can find those kinds of opportunities, then we're thrilled. The green stormwater infrastructure that Maureen was talking about, we've been kind of working together informally as a group within the city, trying to look for, again, those opportunities to work together and applying for an EPA grant. Where's the EPA guy? We would love your money. And this, what's so interesting is this, getting us involved in the One Water discussion. Parks was the champion. Parks was the one who came to us and said, we really would love to do this. And I said, it's been on our radar, but they said, let's form a delegation. Let's go to this conference. And hey, by the way, there's a CPA grant. We would love to partner with you, talk to stormwater, talk to others. What in the mayor's office, what are the opportunities for us to leverage some of these initiatives and use some dollars, for some of these public dollars, to advance it? So we were talking about the mayor's initiative. One of the challenges is we don't have examples. We haven't deployed green stormwater infrastructure except for in a few isolated key cases. So we would like to, as part of this grant, our proposal is to create some model projects around town so that developers and others can come see what they look like. The community can see what they look like. It's hard to embrace something that's brand new that you don't know what it is, right? It sounds like, what is that, So this would be an example site. We talked about citing them in some of our complete communities, which are historically disadvantaged neighborhoods. These are communities that have already expressed an interest in partnering on these types of projects. If we can reach out to them, get their buy-in, get their support to cite some of those things in their communities and maybe champion through some job training to help manage those sites, help take care of them, which is a barrier for us in terms of just having the manpower and the cost of maintaining these sites. Boy, that's a win. Then we're looking at equity issues and creating green in neighborhoods that may not have a whole lot of it. So it's exciting. Yep, thank you. And this is kind of our last slide. I don't expect you to read this, I really promise. That was just more like being graphical and interesting. But as part of our climate action plan, one of the things that we're looking at is we're kind of studying different themes. And one of them is living with and without water. And so these are some of the questions that were generated as part of that project. So we're looking at shocks and stressors in the community related to living with and without water. Some of these relate to drought. Some of them relate to flooding. Of course, flooding is on people's minds, but as we've been talking about, drought will come back. Drought always comes back. And so we were looking at it on a regional level all the way down to the individual level, and how do those questions appear in the minds of the community, because that's who we were engaging in this process. So that's kind of where we are as a city. Do you have anything else to add?
No, you did a great job.
Okay.